Hello and welcome to Rules of the Game, where three lawyers demystify the rules nonprofits have to follow when they're advocating on the issues they care about. I'm Tim Mooney.
I'm Leslie Barnes.
And I'm Quyen too. And we're attorneys at Alliance for Justice's Boulder Advocacy Program. Every day we take calls and emails from nonprofits on how to safely and boldly take stances on women's health, climate change, civil rights, and much more.
On this show, we'll talk about some of the greatest hits, questions we get every day. We try to keep the jargon to a minimum, but if you're new to nonprofit advocacy work, check out our starter video at boulderadvocacy.org/start.
Today, we're going to break down an interaction in Minneapolis following the police killing of George Floyd to talk about the ways individuals and nonprofits can engage with local officials. Leslie, before I play that clip, can you give us a little bit of the contextual details around this so we know what we're about to listen to?
Certainly. So we're about to hear a community activist talking to a group that has gathered to hear from the Minneapolis Mayor, Jacob Frey. So take it away, Tim.
All right, here we go.
Jacob Frey, we have a yes or no question for you. Yes or no, will you commit to defunding Minneapolis Police Department?
Abolition of it?
What did I say? We don't want no more police. Is that clear? We don't want people with guns toting around in our community, shooting us down. You have an answer? It is a yes or a no. It is a yes or a no. Will you defund the Minneapolis Police Department? All right, be quiet, y'all. Be quiet, because it's important that we actually hear this. It's important that we hear this, because if y'all don't know, he's up for re-election next year. If y'all don't know, he's up for re-election next year. And if he says no, guess what the we gonna do next year? Louder one more time.
Loud and clear.
Louder. Take a crowd. Yeah.
I do not support full abolition.
All right. Lie. You're wasting our time. Get the out of here. Get the out. Go home, Jacob. Go home. Go home, Jacob. Go home. Go home, Jacob. Go home.
So what we heard here was a community activist, Candace Montgomery, talking to a crowd that had gathered outside of the mayor's office, and she's asking the mayor, Jacob Frey, whether he will commit to defunding the police department shortly after the killing of George Floyd by police officers. And he responds in the negative, and before he responds, Candace alerts the crowd that he is up for re-election next year in 2021, and she kind of indicates, it's really important that we listen to his question because depending upon his answer, it might tell us how to vote. The mayor, Jacob Frey, responds that he is not in favor of defunding or disbanding the police department, and then when the crowd hears that, they express their displeasure by chanting, "Go home, Jacob, go home." So Quyen, what can you tell us a little bit about this individual, Candace Montgomery, and what do you think about what she said?
Wow, we have quite a bit to start with. So first of all, Candace Montgomery is wearing a lot of different hats. She is an individual, right? She also happens to be working for a C3 and a C4 in another capacity. So in this context, if she was there solely in her individual capacity, then she is free to say whatever she wants to say. But on this show, we talk about nonprofit advocacy. So we're going to dive a little bit more deeply into what she can and cannot do in her C3 and C4 capacity. So take it away, Tim.
Yeah, I think it's worth underscoring exactly what you said there, that Miss Montgomery is active in her community as a community organizer. And in this instance, it's pretty clear that she's taking this on as an individual and as a member of the community. So we're in pure First Amendment territory right here. She's allowed to do this type of activity. It's important work, obviously. I mean, of course, we had Alliance for Justice support Black Lives Matter and everything that's around all of that. And this was an important question for the mayor. So as a community organizer in this instance, all of these things are on the table and everything is all okay. The interesting thing, and we're going to talk about this in other episodes, is that often folks like Ms. Montgomery wear a variety of different hats. And sometimes when you're representing your C3 or your C4 wearing those hats, some of the rules change a little bit. And what you're allowed to say on behalf of organizations is going to be based on what those organizations are allowed to do. So for purposes of this episode, let's change things up a little bit. And let's say that instead of being a community organizer acting in a perfectly legal way as an individual, what if Candace Montgomery was representing her 501c3 organization? Would that change whether or not this was okay to be doing this on behalf of a 501c3? What do you think, Leslie?
Absolutely, a 501c3 can hold elected officials accountable. So there are several things a C3 could do to highlight the mayor's response to this question. I would start with the one rule that we talked about in an earlier episode. 501c3 public charities cannot intervene in the outcome of an election. So they cannot support or oppose a candidate. It means they cannot indicate a bias or whether they might support or oppose a candidate for re-election. So the one part where she highlighted, the mayor's response will tell us how to vote in an upcoming election would not be something that a 501c3 should highlight. So what are some of the ways that a C3 could highlight this mayor's response to her question?
Well, one way that strikes me is that we could just purely focus on the public policy issues, right? It's important that at this time we're having these conversations about whether or not our current policing system is effective. And so if she had asked the mayor, well, what is your position on defunding the police, and just let him answer instead of bringing in the fact that he's also going to be up for re-election next year, and it's important to hear what his answer is, it would have kept it in pure, safe, as we'd like to say on this show, red light, yellow light, green light. It would have been a green light communication as a C3 if she had just focused on the policy aspect of it. Another way to do so is not to link it to the individual directly, although I will admit it's pretty hard to do in this case because she's having a conversation with the mayor. But if it was just a communication that was written, it could be, what does the city of Minneapolis think about this? Or some agency that's in charge of budgeting for the city. As opposed to naming the mayor himself, that would help make it seem like it's less of a partisan activity as well. Tim, any other thoughts strike you?
A couple of things. The first thing that I would say is that this reminds me a lot of questions that we're getting quite a bit these days on the Buller Advocacy hotline and through our emails as well. And that's about bird dogging elected officials. So if you're not familiar with that term, it's basically having folks from your organization go to public events that are attended or maybe even highlighted by those elected officials, and during any kind of a Q&A time, or sometimes not during a Q&A time, asking pointed questions of policy of these elected officials. And, the same rules apply that we talked about in the prior episode. You can't do anything to support or oppose a candidate for public office. So that is really a similar type of a situation. You can't ask a question and suggest that the answer, one way or the other, from a C3 at least, will impact how you or your organization will behave come the November election, if that person is up for re-election, or maybe even seeking another type of office there. The other thing that I'm thinking about from this perspective is about how, if this were a C4 or another type of organization, they're allowed to do things. They don't have those guardrails that we talked about in that prior episode. So they're allowed to get into things that show support or opposition of candidates. Now, there's a couple of other different laws that we'll talk about in future episodes that might have something to say about how they approach it, but they don't have those same levels of restrictions. So if Miss Montgomery was representing her 501c4 that she's active with there, that would be okay, as in contrast to if she was with a C3. So those are the couple of things that I'm thinking about. Anything else for you, Leslie?
Absolutely. So if I was representing a C3 in Minneapolis and I heard this clip and I wanted to highlight it as is, I would take the clips that focus on the mayor's response to defunding police. I would leave out the item about focusing on reelection. And what I would do if my C3 talked about either criminal justice, racial justice, police reform, any one of those topics. And that allows me to comment as a C3 individual organization on these issues. I would highlight the elected official's response, and I would talk about him clearly as an elected official, not as a candidate. And even though he's not up for re-election until 2021, doesn't matter. I need to keep, as a C3, I need to keep my focus on him as an elected official and keep any praise or criticism on him as an elected official in his official capacity. But I would, I could certainly highlight, I could take to social media with his response. I could express how it is either helpful or harmful to our community, what his response indicates. I could encourage people to take action and contact the mayor and try to persuade him differently. Or if our organization supported his position, his official position, I could encourage people to contact his office and support him. And so a variety of a variety of ways in which you can engage with the public. You can educate the public on this elected official's capacity. As you were saying, Tim, I think there's a variety of ways that non-C3 organizations can also engage on these types of activities.
Well, that was a really interesting example of advocacy that's been in the news lately. So we hope you keep your eyes and ears attuned for opportunities where your C3 can advocate, or your C4 as well. We want to thank everybody for joining us, and we want to share that Boulder Advocacy has a ton of free resources to help put some of the rules you heard us talk about into action. So a couple of things to highlight include the election checklist for 501c3 public charities, election year activities for 501c4 social welfare organization, and accountability advocacy for 501c3s.
We hope this episode helps make you a Boulder advocate. Join us next time for more ways to maximize your advocacy and make positive change in your community.
We're much more than this podcast. If you've got questions, you can call Boulder Advocacy at 866-NP-LOBBY or email us at advocacy@afj.org. You might even get one of us. If you found the show helpful, please rate us on whatever app you're listening so others can find us.
For more resources mentioned on this show, plus the show notes for this podcast, visit boulderadvocacy.org. On behalf of Leslie and Tim, this is Quyen. Thanks for joining.